You saw some situations where like Caitlin's stuck guarding Kelsey and Kelsey's, knocking her off the ball, and Caitlin gets called for a foul and she starts yelling at the refs like, she's grabbing me, and all of the coaches from WNBA teams who were sitting there watching are just cracking up. Kelsey had one situation where she sort of finished through traffic. She'd been struggling a little bit, got through to the hoop, just like yells right in like Becky Hammon and Nikki Fargas's face, and they're just like cracking up like
The air inside the gym at the USA Basketball Training Complex in North Carolina carried a distinct charge, a hum of focused intensity laced with unspoken stakes. It wasn't just the squeak of high-performance sneakers on polished hardwood, or the percussive echo of a ball being dribbled with purpose. It was the weight of evaluation, the silent scrutiny of coaches perched on sidelines, and the fierce personal battles unfolding within the framework of a simple scrimmage. Here, in January of 2025, under the watchful eyes of a federation in transition, the future of the women's national team was being contested one possession at a time. And at the center of this quiet storm was a player who, just months prior, had been the most conspicuous absence from the sport's grandest stage, Caitlin Clark. The context was critical, a layered foundation upon which every drill, every scrimmage, every interaction gained magnified significance. Clark's last competitive basketball game had been on July 15th, 2024. A debilitating case of plantar fasciitis had abruptly halted a sensational
back on the court. You also got a quote out of Sue Bird about her being impressed with Caitlin just being engaged while she was out and getting back to being able to play. A little bit about what Caitlin looked like on the court, how much fun she was having, how important it was. And then someone else, Angel Reese on the other side, talking about Chicago. That was the article I was not expecting.
Yeah, so we'll start with Caitlin. Obviously, she suffered a lot of just a bevy of injuries in her sophomore season, played her last game on July 15th, even before All-Star Weekend. This was her first real 5-on-5 action since
physically taxing sophomore season with the Indiana Fever. While her peers battled through the WNBA playoffs, Clark was confined to rehabilitation, her world shrinking to treatment tables, conditioning bikes, and the frustrating stillness of recovery. Her season ended not with a buzzer, but with a whimper, leaving a narrative of what could have been hanging over a year that had already seen her evolve from collegiate phenom to professional lightning rod. Meanwhile, the selection process for the 2024 Paris Olympics had concluded with a decision that ignited a firestorm of debate. USA Basketball, under previous leadership, had opted for veteran continuity, program familiarity, and a specific defensive ethos, leaving the league's most explosive draw and statistically dazzling rookie off the roster. The justification centered on international experience, system knowledge, and roster construction arguments that felt academic to millions of fans who saw the omission as a baffling rejection of generational talent and box office magnetism. That decision cast a long shadow, framing Clark's relationship with the national team program not as an inevitable ascent, but as a contested frontier. Now, a new cycle was beginning. Carol Lawson, stepping into a leadership role, was holding her first major training camp. This wasn't just about maintaining a dynasty. It was about imprinting a new philosophy, identifying the pillars for the next 4 years. And, unofficially,
it was a combination of like USA players going against USA players and then also USA players going against the scout team, which was just like players from small colleges all across North Carolina sort of helping out with that scout team practice. And, she looked like Caitlin, right? Like the step back three was there, the passes were there. When she was not playing with Aaliyah Boston, some of the bigs didn't know what to do with their passes. Like there was one time where she passed it to Hamby and Hamby like brought the ball down. It's like, you can't do that. Like this is not,
you gotta keep it up.
You have to keep it up, right?
Straight up, right.
Just like not expecting, where that was coming. But FIBA, naturally, just a lot more physical than other levels of basketball, even more.
Reevaluating previous calculus. The invitees were a mix of established Olympians, seasoned WNBA stars, and a handful of ascendant talents. And among them was Clark, her invitation a formality of her stature. But her spot on the eventual roster, anything but guaranteed. She arrived as the player with the most to prove and, paradoxically, the most ground to make up, having been away from 5-on-5 competition longer than anyone else in the gym. Players from the Phoenix Mercury, for instance, had seen their season extend into mid-September. Clark had a 6-month competitive gap to bridge. Into this pressurized environment stepped Sabrina from The Athletic, granted rare access to the inner sanctum. Her subsequent report wasn't a dry summary of drills. It was a vibrant, visceral dispatch from the front lines of a silent war. And the story she told was one of reclamation and undeniable statement-making. This is the narrative of those 3 days, expanded and examined a story about physicality, perception, and the palpable force of a talent that refuses to be ignored. The first and most foundational revelation from the camp was the explicit acknowledgement of the physical standard. This was preparation for FIBA rules basketball. Sabrina emphasized this point, letting it land with deliberate gravity. FIBA is naturally just a lot more physical than other levels of basketball, even more physical than the WNBA. Let that statement resonate. The entire 2024 WNBA season was permeated by a relentless, often toxic debate about the welcome to the league physicality directed at Clark. It was a national conversation, dissected on talk shows and editorial pages. Were the hard fouls, the body checks, the relentless
It was interesting considering how long she's been out and the fact that she's still ramping up injury-wise, but she looked good. She was just like so happy to be there and like was individually like telling media members how nice it was just to like talk to them again and like that she was just part of the basketball process, even if that includes
ball pressure merely competitive rigor? Or were they targeted intimidation, crossing into unacceptable violence? The league itself seemed to grapple with this, issuing flagrant fouls and suspensions in some instances, while in others allowing a bruising style of play to stand. For Clark, it was a brutal education, a constant test of her durability and mental fortitude. Now, the reporting indicated that the very training camp meant to prepare players for international competition operated at a threshold beyond that WNBA standard. The scout team, composed of players from small colleges across North Carolina, was specifically instructed to embody that FIBA-level aggression. The implication was stark. If the WNBA's physicality was a topic of controversy, the international game was a realm where that same style was not just accepted, but expected and required. The rules permit more contact, more hand-checking, more robust post-play. It is a game of angles, strength, and sheer will, as much as one of finesse and shooting. And into this environment walked Caitlin Clark, her foot ostensibly healed, but her game conditioning a work in progress. She was, by Sabrina's account, still ramping up injury-wise. This is the critical backdrop against which every one of her actions must be measured. She wasn't being eased back in against lower-tier competition. She was thrown directly into the deep end of the most physically demanding brand of basketball on the planet, against the best defenders her country could offer. After the longest layoff of any participant, Sabrina's observation that Clark looked good against this standard is perhaps the most understated yet profound testament to her readiness. It wasn't that she was dominating or scoring at will. It was that she was competing, holding her ground, and executing her game despite the dual disadvantage of rust and ramped-up aggression. This performance silently rebutted a key, often unspoken, concern from her rookie season. Could her slender frame withstand prolonged...
There you have it, fam. Caitlin Clark been an absolute beast at the training camp. Shout out to her, man. Now, I already kind of knew Kelsey Plum and Caitlin Clark was going to be going after it. All right, those are two players battling for that one position, right? And these are two players that absolutely ask crowds to give it to them.
High-level physical punishment. At this camp, against FIBA-level play, the answer was a resounding yes. She wasn't just surviving, she was operating effectively. The step-back three was there. Sabrina noted the very signature weapon that defenders in the WNBA had tried to physically disrupt. Here, against even more physical defense, it was still a viable, potent tool. This wasn't just a player getting back into shape. It was a player demonstrating that her core skills are transcendent, adaptable to any rule set or level of contact. Beyond mere physical resilience, Sabrina's report peeled back a layer on the sophistication of Clark's basketball intellect, particularly her facilitating. She described a revealing, almost pedagogical moment during scrimmages. When she was not playing with Aaliyah Boston, Sabrina reported. Some of the bigs didn't know what to do with her passes. Like there was one time where she passed it to Diarika. Hamby and Hamby brought the ball down. It's like you can't do that. Just like not expecting, where that was coming. This anecdote is a diamond of insight, worth examining from multiple angles. On the surface, it could be misconstrued as a critique of the receiver, but its true significance is as a testament to the passer. Clark's vision and pass delivery operate on a different wavelength. She is not merely throwing a pass to an open player. She is delivering the ball with precise timing, trajectory, and placement to optimize the scoring opportunity. The ideal pass to a post player isn't just one they can catch, it's one that arrives in their shooting pocket, allowing them to catch and finish in one fluid, upward motion, eliminating the dribble or bring down that allows shot blockers to recover. This is advanced, predictive, facilitating. It requires not only seeing the opening but calculating the defender's recovery time, the big stride, and the exact spatial coordinates where hands will be at the moment of
situations where Caitlin's stuck guarding Kelsey and Kelsey's, knocking her off the ball and Caitlin gets called for a foul and she starts yelling at the refs, she's grabbing me, and all of the coaches from WNBA teams who are sitting there watching are just cracking up. Kelsey had one situation where she sort of finished through traffic. She'd been struggling a little bit, got through to the hoop, just yells right in Becky Hammon and Nikki Fargas's face, and they're just cracking up
receipt. Aaliyah Boston, through a full season of partnership with the Fever, has become fluent in this language. She expects the ball now, there, and up high. A new teammate, even an elite one like Diarika Hamby, operating in the unfamiliar context of a training camp scrimmage, is still translating. The fact that Clark was making these passes instinctively, and that they were arriving with such unexpected precision that they caused even WNBA All-Stars to momentarily fumble, speaks volumes. It highlights a unique skill set. Clark makes players around her better not just by drawing defenses and finding them, but by delivering the ball in a way that makes their jobs exponentially easier. This creates a subtle but important subtext for Olympic selection. Team USA is often an amalgamation of superstars accustomed to being primary options, thrown together for short periods. Chemistry is manufactured, not organic. A facilitator who can accelerate that chemistry, who can make the game simpler and more efficient for teammates without a shared history, possesses an immense, perhaps underrated value. Sabrina's observation underscored that Clark isn't just a scorer who passes. She is an offensive ecosystem engineer whose particular genius requires a slight, but learnable, adjustment from those around her. Once that adjustment is made, the entire machine hums at a higher frequency. If the physical and strategic elements formed the stage, the human drama provided the gripping plot, and no subplot was more emblematic of the camp's stakes than the head-to-head clashes between Caitlin Clark and Kelsey Plum. Sabrina painted a vivid picture. You saw some situations where, Caitlin stuck guarding Kelsey and Kelsey's, knocking her off the ball, and Caitlin gets called for a foul and she starts yelling at the refs. She's grabbing me. And all the coaches from WNBA teams who were sitting there watching are just cracking up. Later, she described Plum battling through traffic, finishing a play, and then yelling triumphantly right into the faces of coaches Becky Hammon and Nikki Fargas, who could only laugh in response. Classic Kelsey, Sabrina noted. This wasn't petty animosity. It was the pure, uncut essence of high-stakes competition. Plum, an Olympic gold medalist.
Right. Stirring it up. I love that. I love that you could see the storylines continue from the W season into this camp. And I want to particularly hit on
a WNBA champion and one of the most fiercely competitive guards in the world, represents the established order. She is the embodiment of the veteran, battle-tested, program-proven player that USA basketball has historically favored. Clark, the prodigy, the record breaker, the box office phenomenon, represents the insurgent force, the new wave of talent demanding its place. Their matchup was a perfect microcosm of the overall roster debate. Plum, using her strength and veteran savvy to create space and draw fouls. Clark, immediately protesting the non-calls, her competitive fire boiling over in real time. The WNBA coaches laughing wasn't derision. It was recognition. They were witnessing two alpha competitors, cut from the same psychic cloth, going at each other's throats for a prize that, while unstated, hung in the air, legitimacy, and a seat on the plane to the next Olympics. Plum thrives on this. She famously told Spike Lee to talk louder so she could hear his trash talk. Clark has spent her entire career feeding off the energy of hostile crowds, using their
that on the site, just like how people have been perceiving the negotiations and what still affects them and what they're thinking about with regards to the new collective bargaining agreement. But for now, just good time at camp. 3 days in North Carolina. A little snow on one of the days, just a little taste of the winter in the South. But
Right.
yeah, it was interesting just to see what Carol Lawson is prioritizing in terms of how she wants to make her imprint on this program.
noise as fuel for silencing performances. Putting them together was less a coaching decision and more an act of throwing two elemental forces into the same containment field. The resulting energy was palpable, even through a reporter's description. This was not a casual scrimmage. This was a trial by combat. And Clark was not merely participating. She was engaging at Plum's level, matching her intensity, refusing to back down from the physical and psychological challenge. For a player supposedly ramping up, this displayed a game-ready mentality. She wasn't there to collect a participation jersey. She was there to take a spot. Perhaps the most unexpectedly telling part of Sabrina's report dealt not with basketball actions, but with demeanor and presence. She was just like so happy to be there, Sabrina said of Clark. She was individually telling media members how nice it was just to talk to them again and that she was just part of the basketball process. After the maelstrom of her rookie year, the unprecedented attention, the physical toll, the injury, the Olympic snub, the constant, often invasive scrutiny, this simple joy was a powerful revelation. It portrayed a player who, stripped of the peripheral noise, fundamentally loves the game. Her engagement during her injury timeout was noted by none other than Sue Bird, the legendary point guard and a keen observer of the next generation. Bird was reportedly impressed with how Clark remained dialed in, studying, learning, and staying connected to the team even when she couldn't play. This combination, the palpable joy of returning, the studious engagement while sidelined, and the fierce competitiveness when activated, paints the complete portrait of an elite athlete. It dismantles any residual, lazy narratives about being distracted by fame or unable to handle professional adversity. It showed a player who had used her forced hiatus not to disconnect, but to mentally recharge and deepen her understanding. She returned not with a chip on her shoulder, but with a renewed, evident love for the craft and a clear-eyed focus on the work. This mental and emotional reset, visible to observers at the camp, is as crucial to her future success as any physical rehab. So, what do these 3 days in North Carolina, as meticulously reported, ultimately tell us? They tell us that Caitlin Clark, against a baseline of FIBA-level physicality that surpasses the WNBA standard she endured, not only held her own, but displayed her full offensive arsenal, while still in a reconditioning phase. They tell us that her playmaking is so nuanced and anticipatory that it can momentarily discombobulate even elite professional teammates, indicating a skill that could rapidly elevate a hastily assembled national team. They tell us that she engaged in direct, heated competition with a cornerstone of the current Olympic team, Plum, and matched her in intensity and desire, proving her mental fortitude belongs on that stage. They tell us that she did all this with a visible, rejuvenating joy, demonstrating a mature and sustainable professional mindset. Sabrina's closing analysis was pointed. We're not talking about a player hoping to make the team. We're talking about a player who already proved she belongs. This is the seismic shift. The conversation is no longer if Caitlin Clark is good enough for Team USA. The training camp evidence rendered that question obsolete. The conversation has now irrevocably shifted to how USA basketball accommodates her. Can Carol Lawson and her staff afford to once again sideline this combination of transcendent talent, proven production, and market-moving appeal in favor of a rigid adherence to veteran continuity? Does the system outweigh the system-breaking ability Clark possesses? The 2024 omission was justified by a lack of professional data and a crowded guard rotation. That justification has now evaporated. She has her professional data, a Rookie of the Year caliber season, cut short by injury. She has now performed under the direct observation of the new national team hierarchy, in the specific, physical style they prioritize, and she excelled. The ball, as the saying goes, is now in USA Basketball's court. They witnessed the proof of concept. They saw the step-back threes over outstretched arms, the passes that arrived a half-second before expectation, the fiery exchanges with an Olympic champion, and the smile of a player simply thrilled to be back in the fray. The 3 days in North Carolina were more than a training camp. They were a recalibration. Caitlin Clark didn't just attend a camp. She forcefully re-entered the Olympic roster conversation and fundamentally changed its terms. She is no longer a prospect on the horizon. She is a present and undeniable force, and the decision to include her or exclude her next time will define not just a roster, but the philosophical direction of USA Basketball for the next generation. The battle for 2028 began in a gym in North Carolina, and a clear, unmistakable statement was made.